Those of you that have never been to an ethics roundtable before or are new to it might not know about the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative collegiate program at UCCS College of Business. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Tracy Gonzalez-Padron, the director of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative at UCCS, and also a professor in the College of Business. The ethics roundtables provide UCCS faculty and staff, along with invited students and our counterparts from Southern Colorado, to hear from a UCCS ethics fellow on innovative approaches to teach ethics and implement principle-based ethics in their workplace or their area of expertise. So we are so pleased to be able to learn from Dan Lykins. Dan is a senior instructor of human physiology and nutrition and an UCCS ethics fellow. So I'm going to let Dan share his humorous way of taking washing hands and using an ethical perspective. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that so much. So here we go. Gosh, I'm so excited to be here and talking with you guys today. Where to start is the big question. I've got so much that I want to cover, which is always my problem. So I said, let's start here with more introduction. So this is my family, and right in the middle, you can see my beautiful wife, Jill. If you don't know me, this is what my face looks like for the most part. And this is my youngest son, Noah. My family. My other son is in Wisconsin and didn't make it into this picture. Hasn't been around here for a little bit, so I didn't grab a picture. But so here's my family, and I wanted to show you something that my son shared with me from a class the other day called the fun theory. And I have this theory that I apparently share with Volkswagen, who made this video, that fun is very important, and we can actually teach a lot without saying things simply by causing people to have fun. So let me click on this video and hopefully it'll play nicely and we can watch it. Did everyone hear the audio? It's really, really cool. When you look at this, the installation we have, there's no signage. It doesn't say you can, make sound. It just looks like a piano keyboard. And then it makes piano sounds as people walk.
Hear it, fine.
Thank you. And the escalator remains empty. I can get this to stop. When I'm in class, I do a life lesson, and I always do the same life lesson at the beginning of every course, every semester on the lesson one. This was my life lesson that I have for people. I call it Kevin Olson's Law. Kevin Olson was an aircraft commander when I was an aircraft commander. We were young together, and Kevin had an interesting story that he got married. And one day he woke up and his wife and the car keys in the car were gone. And she left. And he never saw, apparently, the keys or the car again. And yet he was the happiest guy I knew. And he said something that really struck me. He would say it from time to time. He would say, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And I said, huh, that is Kevin Olson's law. That's this like it's a thing. And then I started making this into a challenge and response with my students. And they started telling me, Lieutenant Dan, which is what I have my students call me, Lieutenant Dan, this has changed our life. It's changing the way we're approaching things. So here's when I make this a challenge and response, it sounds like this. Now you don't have to unmute your mic, but I'm going to say if you're not having fun, and I want you to actually say the words where you are, all over the city, wherever we are, say your response shall be, you're not doing it right. I'll whisper it so you know when to say that. So I'm going to do that 3 times. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Not doing it right.
I can hear Tracy. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And so that's kind of how I approach class. If I'm not having fun, I'm not doing it right. If my students aren't having fun, then they're not doing it right. And I haven't given them maybe the opportunities to have fun. So I really try to work at that so that people can have fun because I don't know if you've ever had a class that's boring, but it is not fun. And it feels like you're not doing it right to me because I'm very, intentional and thoughtful about that. So Tracy was apologizing. She didn't have an intro, so let's let a really big intro begin. I hope that you're having a great life so far. I have 4 dogs at my house as part of the fun that I have, and this is Honey, and you can see Honey is clearly having fun right now as she sits on that dog Gracie right there. And this is just another look at me. I'm going to give you a little more intro, but I wanted to show you what it's like at my house in the morning. So I've got 4 dogs. This is Honey. She's the oldest. And then we've got Hope, who is a therapy dog. And we've got Gracie, who's also a certified therapy dog. And we've got Abby Joy, daughter of Gracie. And we're hoping that Abby Joy is going to have puppies in about, I think it's about 6 weeks. We find out in a couple weeks if she actually has pups in there, but we've spent a bunch of money getting her bred. And so we're gonna have more puppies and more fun. And then it'll feel like we're doing it right at my house. And I just want to say, our perspectives on the world matter and they arise by way of what we experience. And I have a suspicion that my experiences are different than yours because I grew up differently than you. So here's a picture of me as a youngster. One of my sisters actually sent these out in the mail last week. And the back of the photo says 1973, which would make me 6 years old here. This is my father, Charles, and my uncle Sherm. They're identical twins. And I grew up as a hunter-gatherer. For real, these people still exist. And so this that they're holding here, this is a snapping turtle my dad has and a bigger snapping turtle that my uncle has. And this was dinner. This is 3 meals for us. This little one was going to be 1 really nice meal, and then this big one would be 2 very adequate meals. And so I have a different perspective based on what I have seen in the world. And so part of what I've seen is hygiene was not a big thing growing up as a hunter-gatherer. I mean, I was probably 10 or 12 years old, and my sister said to me, Dan, you should shower. I said, why would I do that? You should brush your teeth. Why would I do that? I was a hunter-gatherer. I was like Tarzan growing up. I literally grew up differently. So now I've got you thinking, okay, really, who is this Lieutenant Dan Lykins fellow? So here's how this all went down. I grew up in this state of Michigan, in that county right about there, and spent the years of 67 when I was born to 85 when I graduated high school and went off to college. And so literally in the wilds of Michigan is where I grew up. And I went off to college nearby UCCS at this place, and I got to throw my hat in the air. 4 years later, some jets went overhead, which was really cool in 1989. And then I went off and I flew airplanes. And I flew this particular airplane, a KC-135, and they let me sit in the front seats a lot and actually control the aircraft. So that was a real hoot. And this little stinger that it looks like is coming off the back here is actually for air refueling. This airplane comes up and the 2 link up. There's a guy that sits in the back or lays down in the back and connects this part to that airplane while we're flying, and we would transfer fuel. Hilarious fun. And I learned a lot doing that about people in the world. I got to see a lot of the world doing that. And then in the year 2000, I went back to this place and I started teaching college. I'd been teaching people how to fly this aircraft and do this mission. And I went and I taught biology for a while at the Air Force Academy. And then I retired and I went to a place that you might be familiar with. It's called UCCS. And I've been there since then doing that, teaching biology related subjects. And so now I'm in a different department. We don't call it biology anymore, but I still think I teach biology related things. And so that's a little bit more about who I am. This is what I looked, oops, I want to go back one. Sorry about that. This is what I looked like when I was on active duty towards the end. And I've always had an interest in the outdoors. And so I love plants, I love nature. And once upon a time, my hair was that color. And then I love birds, and gosh, it's so fun being in Colorado. I always show these, and I tell my students whenever I'm in a classroom with windows, I don't know if you've noticed how the classrooms are usually set up. The instructor has the view of the windows. So I'm like, if you look at me and it looks like I'm looking out the windows, it's because I'm watching birds while I'm teaching, which is a common thing. I used to watch birds while I was flying as well. I like beautiful things. I like plants. I like nature. I also sometimes enjoy danger just a little bit. It's so exciting. So this plant that I'm touching here, this purple one, is beautiful, beautiful plant. Don't eat it. It's toxic. It will make you very much sick and you won't appreciate it at all. And then you might notice that on this plant, there are two structures that we call bumblebees. And it would appear that I'm petting the bumblebee because I'm petting the bumblebee. Because if you figure out how to pet the bumblebee, you can pet the bumblebee and find out it's really soft and fun, and you can have fun with bumblebees. And I like danger. And so I don't know if you can see this white plant right here, but there's a plant right here that has killed more people in Colorado than any other plant because it's toxic. And the miners used to dig it up thinking that its bulbs were onions. They'd eat them. Then someone would find their skeleton down the road and figure, yeah, Joe didn't make it. He must have eaten some of that stuff. And back here, we've got a poisonous plant as well. This is poison hemlock, the one that killed Socrates, hemlock tea. That's the plant. So you've got 3 poisonous plants and a bumblebee. And I thought this was just one of the greatest photos ever. I love it. But this is actually the best nature photo ever. I did not take this one. This is the end of the bee, apparently, that has some issue, the people getting stung. This was taken in about 2008. But look at the beautiful, so everyone looks at this photo. This was internet famous in about 2008. I look at this and I go, look at this beautiful borage plant here. Aren't they gorgeous? So I love nature. I love beauty. I love having fun. I also love bacon. So I hope that you are a bacon aficionado as well. If you are just getting into understanding that bacon is one of the better foods we have, International Bacon Day is coming up. We're only 185 more days to wait because on 4 September, the Saturday before Labor Day, we will have International Bacon Day. And our country, the United States, is so great that we have 2 bacon days that we celebrate. There's International Bacon Day, and then there's a Bacon Day after that. So you should look these things up. When I was in the Air Force, I got to do some fun things and be in jets. And we usually stayed in fancy hotels. And my Army students always make fun of me. They don't realize that it wasn't all fun and games. This is an image from Turkey where I spent the better part of a year. And it was an unaccompanied remote. So this is remote Turkey. This is an actual carport in Turkey in a little town called Kayapınar, which was very near where I stayed. And it was a modern town because they did have a men's room. This is the men's room. And they had a women's room as well. So bayan means man and women, or men and women. And this is my friend Ufuk Bey, who's eating ishkembe, which I said to him, Ufuk Bey, can you please take us, and me especially, to go try cow stomach soup? I want to try this. I would not recommend it, but I have tried it. It's fun. It's exciting. And I just want you to know why would I show you all that? A long introduction. I want you to know I'm a person too, just like you. I'm approachable, and so I've had some experiences, and I've eaten some cow stomach along the way, and I've had some different foods, and it's occurred to me as I've observed these different things that sometimes we get sick, and it appears that there's a reason behind this. It's called the germ theory of disease. And usually I think that happened not too long ago, but it was first proposed in the year 1546 by an Italian named Girolamo Fracastoro. 475 years ago. For 475, we are coming up on 500 years of having a germ theory of disease. And yet people don't always act like it. And so, of course, we're in a global pandemic right now, so it's been more on the forefront of people's minds. And But I'm going to ask you, does it still seem like, even 475 years later, that this germ theory of disease could possibly still, at this point in time, be valid? Well, let's think back a little bit and ask ourselves, have there been any diseases that have gone around? Yeah, it seems like recently there was a problem with Ebola not too many years ago, and then there was a measles outbreak again, and every year we seem to have influenza, and we have cold viruses that travel around and people get those, and recently it's been an issue with COVID, and so there's this COVID problem, and we're all having to adapt and change our lives and sit behind computers for days and days and days instead of getting to sit in front of people and try to distance ourselves because of the output of this germ theory of disease. So yeah, it seems like it really is a real thing. Next, I want to tell you that I am not a germaphobe. And my students sometimes accuse me, sir, we think you're a germaphobe, particularly early on in the semester. They think I'm a germaphobe. I'm not a germaphobe. I just don't want your disease. So I want students to know that I'm going to score them. So I show them a video on day one. It's probably to my mind, the funniest video I've ever seen. It's about 5 minutes, and it's so funny that I want to show it to you. And it's about coughing and sneezing. So I want to remind you that our talk today is actually about hand washing, and I will eventually wrap back around to hand washing. But the story of how I got here, I think, is interesting, at least to me, because I grew up as a hunter-gatherer. I mean, I've had my hands inside of deer and rabbits and squirrels, and sometimes I'd wash, and I mean, usually I'd wash, but not always. So let's see how this plays out in the classroom with me. So this is a video that's called "Why Don't We Do It in Our Sleeves?" So I'm going to press the play button, and we'll make this work. This is where we say, you go there. You can do it.
Please take this opportunity to adjust the volume on your television set. Millions of disease-causing germs are launched into the atmosphere every time someone coughs or sneezes. It is customary to cough and sneeze into one's hands, supposedly to prevent the spread of germs. But germs get onto the cougher's hands and are spread to telephones and doorknobs, and from there they are spread to other people's hands and mouths, and who knows where else. The best place to cough is into fabric, such as one's sleeve, where germs are trapped while they desiccate and die.
The students all laugh at this part. I think it's hilarious.
But people in polite society do not cough into their sleeves. Such behavior is frowned upon. The purpose of this video is to make coughing into one's sleeve fashionable and even patriotic. It's the right thing, the polite thing to do. You will now see 4 excellent, slightly different coughing techniques executed first into the right sleeve and then into the left. The technique will vary depending on your dimensions, the flexibility of your joints, whether you are wearing long or short sleeves, and your ability to cough at an angle. Notice the slight change of position during a sneeze, with the nose a little lower. You will now see a series of coughs and sneezes performed by random subjects. Their coughs will be judged by our panel of 3 infectious disease experts, Dr. Graham Stain, Dr. Blood Hagar, and Dr. Polymorph. First, the coughs.
That would be a 4.
That's a
the left
3.
hand was
Way too
needlessly
close to the
contaminated.
10. Perfect.
9.
Hand on opposite
Great.
shoulder creates a mask
No
at the
qualms
elbow.
about messing
Ideal.
up his beautiful suit.
4.7.
4.
He
The
should
elbow's a
cough
bad
into
Way
his
too
target
leaky at the
for
bicep.
elbow.
with long arms. 8.
7.6.
Easy.
I like it.
Practical.
Almost as good as the black suit guy.
Pathetic.
Awful, not fit
0.
for healthcare
Jeez,
field.
what planet did he come from?
Now, the sneezers.
2.
1.
He contaminated his
3.5.
hands.
Yuck. Why bother with the
Why do they
Kleenex?
always smile when they're finished?
That's a 1.
Her right
She should go and
hand's
wash
more
her hands
dangerous
now.
than her left.
5.
5.2.
His hand got hit.
Impractical.
9. Wow,
9.
great germ
Great.
entrapment.
Nearly
But they messed up
perfect.
their hair.
Who let him back in? Get that guy out of here.
Disgusting.
He doesn't rate the
Yuck.
time of day.
A perfect 10.
9.9.
What more can I
Awesome.
say?
She's the one to imitate.
We must train ourselves to cough into the nearest appropriate fabric, which is usually a sleeve. Most healthcare garments lend themselves well to this technique. Unfortunately, many street clothes do not. To avoid messes, we should formulate coughing strategies for the clothes and accessories we are wearing each day.
I could have saved my shirt if I did that first time.
Paper tissues are good cough receptacles when they are placed over the mouth properly, but using them usually results in hand contamination. They should not be reused. Handkerchiefs suffer from the same hand contamination and reuse problems, and they have the additional disadvantage of poor accessibility.
Achoo!
Ew! Ew!
From an infection control standpoint, the perfect answer would be an armband that could be changed after each use. However, society is not yet ready for such a radical change. So, in keeping with the recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, why don't we just do it in our sleeves? It's the right thing. It's the polite thing to do. And remember, if you make a mistake and cough or sneeze into your hands, please wash them immediately.
And that's the end of that video. And so I show that whole video to my students, and shucks, it has an effect on them that I never expected. And so, oh gosh, I don't want this to play.
Please take
Later.
this opportunity to adjust the volume on your television set.
There you go. Escape. Pardon me while I turn this off, because I really want this to not play in the background. That would be horrific if it was to do that. We want to go over here. Let me know, Tracy, if you hear the video start in the background. Oh gosh. No.
Please take.
Stop. I've got to go on to the next slide. That's where I want to be.
Move your cursor away from the video.
There we go. Okay. So, well, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that. So what I saw was, in showing the students this video, and then I would tell them at the end of it, I would say, hey, you are literally going to be scored like the ice skating scoring on a 10-point scale. And the first person would cough or sneeze, I would score them. And I take it out to the second decimal place. So, you know, someone would get something like usually a 7.81 or something like that. And I tell them also, if you have 3 coughs or sneezes below an 8 during any single session of lecture, you will be ejected from the classroom. And suddenly it gets real quiet and no one coughs or sneezes for a period of time. And they're all stifling it because they're afraid. I have asked them, they've told me, we're afraid to cough and sneeze. We don't want to be rated, because they figure out I'm going to rate them publicly aloud in front of the classroom. And then someone breaks the ice and they have a cough or sneeze that they don't stifle fully. And, you know, they get an 8.68 or whatever it is that they get. And pretty soon what I notice is everyone's coughing and sneezing really, really well. And they're scoring in the 9s, and sometimes even 10s are awarded. And then they tell me, after a period of a few weeks, they've shown the video to their husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, their families, their roommates, and they're scoring other people because we've made it fun, which is really cool. Because I sat with teenagers and preteens for a number of years, and it took a long time to get them to actually stop coughing and sneezing without covering appropriately. It's hard to do. Getting people to change their behavior is hard to do. So I wondered, how can we transfer this approach of using humor, perhaps a video, to hand washing? And maybe are there some components to this that have to do actually with ethical principles? And what's what's going on from an ethics perspective that people are so not wanting to wash their hands? So let me say this. Well, let me have you watch this video. This is good. So this is Bugs Bunny, and this one's called "And Me, Boss."
One for you and one for me. Two for you and one, two for me. Three for you and one, two, three for me. Yeah.
What's up, Doc?
One for you.
How about me, boss?
Oh, yeah, one for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
And one for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
Gee, Rocky, he was certainly kind-hearted.
Rocky's a little too smart for you. Yeah, a little too smart. Yeah.
Move on to the next slide. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to see next. There we go. So
one for you and one for me. Two for you and one.
There we go. So I thought about this for a very long time, and I said, I'll do some reading. I'll do some research. How about if we take the best of what the World Health Organization has for hand washing? And in my reading and what I found, I like something called My 5 Moments for Hand Washing. So this is a poster that I've had commissioned, and we're going to get printed and hung in my wall, and I'll use it in conjunction with the Bugs Bunny video that I just showed you. One for you, one for me, one for you, one for me. I want my students to be able to tell a joke every time they are washing their hands. I want them to remember a joke so that they get rewarded with humor when they wash their hands. I think that would be wonderful if we could do that. And so this poster shows the 5 times that professionals in the medical fields should be washing their hands, need to wash their hands before touching a patient, before clean procedures such as inserting a peripheral line or central line or changing a catheter, that sort of thing, after bodily fluid exposure, and after touching a patient, and after touching patient surroundings. And I call it 5 for me, 5 for you, which is what the nurse says here. 5 for me, and you can see she's got bubbles, she's washing her hands. I want her to show her hands to her patient, say, I'm washing my hands. It's 5 for me, 5 for you. So that's the tie back to Bugs Bunny and the joke and the humor, so that they get rewarded with a little bit of humor every time they wash their hands. They can chuckle over that. But people in the medical professions end up washing their hands a ridiculous number of times per day if they do this. And so it can be anywhere from 80 to 120 upwards towards 200 times a day if a person is to wash their hands. So using soap and water, you're going to remove the oils from your hands, and your hands are going to become chapped. So the hygiene professions and industry has come up with something called alcohol-based hand sanitizers. And as long as you don't have visible dirt on your hands, if you can't see anything, and you haven't had a bodily fluid exposure, you can use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And so it seems to me that incorporating humor in this way would be a good way to do this. And I also wanted to look at it and say, from an ethics principles perspective, where does this match up with ethics? Where are there ethics involved in this little mundane task that nurses and CNAs and PAs and physicians assistants have to do so many times a day? Well, it's integrity, right? I mean, that makes sense. And you're building trust with your patients if you do it. And you're supposed to be accountable. And there's an fairness and respect of the people that you're working with, and you've got rules and procedures at the place where you work. And there's also an element of viability. We want to not give a disease to our patient so that they then could potentially suffer morbidity or even mortality from it. But it occurred to me that there's something that's missing from the ethics principles in the hand washing practices that we have in place today. And that component is the ethics principle of transparency. And transparency means it's defined very simply as maintaining open and truthful communication. And so that seems to me to be the one part where this is missing. I mean, when you go to the doctor and someone pops a thermometer in your mouth, or they're scanning you for, do you stop and ask them, have you washed your hands? It's really awkward to do that. It's really uncomfortable to do that. And so I'm going to go black screen on this now, and you can just look at me, and I want to talk for a little bit. As I started doing research and started talking to people, you talk to surgeons, they're like, yes, we always wash our hands. Of course. I mean, we've got this ritual, we do it, we're taught how, and it's a thing, it's expected, you scrub in. You talk to nurses, yes, we do it, of course, always. And you talk to CNAs, and like, yeah, mostly we do. And so as I was talking to health professionals and getting started, thank you so much, Tracy Padron Gonzalez. Oh my goodness. She put me on to a UCCS graduate. His name is Tom Murata, and Tom is a vice president for a global principles at Ecolab Corporation. So it's headquarters in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he lives, and he travels around the world, and he's got a team that works for him. And they are responsible for a really interesting phenomenon. The phenomenon is you can walk into a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, and you don't worry about getting sick, even though most of the people working there are young very often. And I've been telling you twice already, at least I sat with young people at a dinner table. It's hard to get them to cough and sneeze correctly. It's hard to get them to wash their hands correctly and to be diligent about it. But Ecolab teaches this, and they put systems in place, and then they let contracts, and they work in hospitals very often. They'll let big contracts for hospitals. They'll get hired to, hey, we've got to get our folks to wash their hands, usually after they've had some sort of a problem. And Tom put me on to one of his deputies named Linda Homan, and so I got to talk to Linda Homan. I said, tell me, how does this work? How do you make it work in a hospital to get people to wash their hands? And she said, well, we have this, it's a technology solution that works pretty well, where you've seen folks working in hospitals and medical facilities. They'll have a lanyard around their neck, and they'll have all these little tags on them. One's an ID card, and one gets them through the door, and one tells them how to do CPR. And if you freeze and forget, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. And they've got procedures that they want them to follow. So she said, we just give them another card, and that other card has an RFID chip, a radio frequency identification chip, and then we'll put chips in patient rooms, and we'll put them under the bed, and we'll put them next to the sink, and we'll put them at the alcohol-based hand sanitizer station. And what happens is, surprisingly, we find that the statistic that happens is about 23% of the time, people will wash their hands or clean their hands, sanitize them as they're supposed to, which is really appalling, because that means about 77%, or 3/4 of the time, there was a need for hand washing based on their unit guidelines, the World Health Organization guidelines of when people should be washing hands, and they're not doing it routinely. Chrissy Bailey, I called her out before we were starting. Chrissy emailed me, and she said, when my father was in the hospital, it was so frustrating. We had to ask the people to wash their hands so many times. Yeah, because we don't have anything in place in terms of transparency, that we've built a patient-provider expectation that anyone coming in that's going to touch your surroundings or clean you or touch you, or when they leave, before they come in, they're going to communicate openly, hey, 5 for me to keep me healthy and 5 for you. I've washed my hands. So I'm like, wow, that is just amazing. And so she said that they can, by implementing their systems, get the response rate of people washing their hands. And it doesn't matter whether they do it in a positive, you get paid more if you have high stats for washing your hands and hand hygiene, or if it's negative, depending on what the client wants to implement, they can usually get a hospital facility up around 80%. Like, wow. When I was in the Air Force, one of my mentors, he was a squadron commander, told me, he said, if you can find an 80% solution, take it. He said 75 to 80% information going into solving you've got to make a decision in terms of policy. Go for an 80% solution. That's wonderful. You're never going to get 100%. And so Ecolab has made a business out of trying to get hospitals and other places to get an 80% solution, which is incredible. I want to give you one more backstory. My slides kind of jumped, I think, because of the problems with getting the YouTube videos to stop. They jumped out of order. I wanted to tell you, and I had slides and stuff as I had built. When I was flying in the Air Force, when I was stationed in Oklahoma in it's about it's exactly 1998, my parents came out to visit me. And I got sick with something that my mother called the 24-hour flu. And it was a short visit. It's about a 3-day visit that my mother and father and my uncle that I showed you with the turtle were visiting. And my wife didn't get along with them as well because they're very different. She's civilized. I'm less civilized. And I was down for the count. I mean, it was the 24-hour flu usually goes 24 to 48 hours as described by my mother. And it includes vomiting. Usually you feel like death warmed over. Sometimes you're laying there and you wish you could die. Oh, the agony of it. It's horrific. And sometimes it's accompanied with diarrhea. Sometimes it's not. And so in 98, my wife said, after she entertained my parents for 2 days, and I was sick in bed for 2 days, they left. And she said to me, Dan, you have got to do something and make a change so that you don't have this 24-hour flu 3 to 4 times a year, because I was literally getting this 3 to 4 times a year. And so I thought back and I said, one of our good friends, Gretchen and Henry, Gretchen was a stewardess for Southwest Airlines. And if you went to Gretchen and Henry's home for dinner, if you didn't make a show of visibly washing your hands before you sat down, Gretchen would direct you, Dan, you need to wash your hands. Go to the powder room and wash your hands. And you'd go into the powder room, there's a toilet, and there's the toilet paper, and it's neatly folded over in a little triangle like you're in an airplane cabin. And you'd wash your hands and come back and you'd have a great time. And I said, I think I'm going to start washing my hands. And so in 98, I started washing my hands. And about that time, there's a company called Bath and Body Works. You may be familiar with them. They're just on the news this morning. And they made this little product as an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Smells really wonderful. I always like the fruit-flavored ones. And I started carrying one of those. And I made a pact with myself. I said, hey, I am not going to I'm not going to touch my eyes, my nose, my mouth, or eat food without at least cleaning my hands with alcohol-based hand sanitizer or washing them. And after a while, I noticed, hey, a year had gone by and I did not have this problem anymore of getting this problem called the 24-hour flu. And a little more time went by and I noticed that it had been 3 years and I didn't have the 24-hour flu. And we made a move in the Air Force. I was teaching at the Air Force Academy and I had to make another move. And so I spent a year in Turkey where I showed you pictures of, and I mentioned it's a second world nation. And when I got there and they saw my name, they said, Dr. Lykins, are you a doctor? I said, no, I'm not a doctor. I said, I'm a pilot. You guys know that. You saw the rip on me. And they said, yeah, you're a pilot, but you teach biology. I said, yes. And what are you getting at? And they said, well, we have a problem. I said, what problem is that? I said, we have a problem with illness. What illness do you have? We have a problem with an illness where people have vomiting and diarrhea. And in our first sergeant, KK, but his name was Kevin, we call him KK, great guy. He misses 2 to 3 days a week where he can't come in because he can't make the ride into the Combined Air Operations Center because he's having diarrhea. We want you to fix that. You've got a biology background. So I called up the flight surgeons. It's a flight to go see the flight surgeon at that time. He was not geographically located with us. There are only 12 Americans in our little facility in the middle of this Turkish base. And what we found out was when our facility was built, our water source that we were drinking and bathing with was it was municipal water from the city of Eskişehir, which has a lot of turbidity. You can visibly see silt and soil in it. So they built a settling pond, and the settling pond they made was a swimming pool. And so unbeknownst to me, there was a parking lot where I'd been parking the car for, at this point, a couple months into the game. There was a parking lot, and beneath that parking lot was an underground swimming pool. And we were literally drinking water from the swimming pool. So they fill the swimming pool, it has a continuous flow in and a continuous flow out. You'd settle out the solids and then you've got a more clear product for water. And that's what people were washing their hands with. And that's what people were washing their veggies with. And so we instituted a change. We said, hey, we've got to do something different here. And what we're going to do is we're going to purchase bottled water, and you're going to use bottled water to wash your hands, and you're going to use bottled water to wash your fruits and vegetables before you eat them, and never use the tap water. You can use that nasty water to bathe in. It's not a problem. It's clear enough to do that, and you've got soap and such on. And we had a remarkable change. We went from KK having 2 to 3 days a week where he couldn't work because of the 24-hour flu, to having maybe 1 day every 2 weeks, to then it became 1 day every 3 weeks, and occasionally it got to every monthly kind of basis. He might have a day here or there. So a remarkable change based on this idea that there is a germ theory of disease. And so we were able to see that. And so that got me thinking, what was this problem that I had with my gut? Because I spent the better part of 9.5 months in Turkey, second world nation, drinking from a swimming pool, and I never actually got the 24-hour flu while I was there, which is remarkable. And so I realized that I was experiencing food poisoning or viral gastroenteritis on a rate of 3 to 4 times a year. That was 1998. We are now in the year 2021. I would have had 24-hour flu between 69 and 92 times in the intervening years. I have not had a single bout of gastroenteritis since 1998 when I started washing my hands. And I just think that's remarkable. It's absolutely astounding that that could happen. And so, gosh, I think there's something to be had in this hand washing. I was telling Tracy beforehand, this presentation is such a departure from what I normally do. I have very few words on the slides. I have so much content to teach. We teach the whole human body in 2 semesters, and the anatomy and the physiology of it. And I just want you to learn 5 things. You know, want my students to learn 5 things and make a joke out of it, and crack the joke inside their heads every time they're telling a patient, hey, look, 5 for me, 5 for you. And so that's what I'm going to do. That was what my project was about. I'm going to bring the Zoom screen back up here. Someone should have said, hey, Dan, why don't you go ahead and stop the screen share. That's what I did. That's my project. I'm about to get that poster produced. We have gone back to in-person labs in A&P, and so I've got students in front of me, and so we're going to be able to implement this soon. I've got to get that poster made and printed and get that up on the wall. And then one of the days when I have a little bit more time than some other days, I'm going to introduce this to my students and start seeing how it goes. I'm showing them the Bugs Bunny video because there's so much value in the humor of it to get them to do something that they don't really want to do. Who wants to wash your hands? I mean, yes, if your hands are dirty, it's great to wash your hands, but if they're not dirty, it dries them out. And talking to healthcare providers, they're like, it takes so much time. I don't have time to do it. Well, if you make a show of doing it, not a big show, make a visible act of, I get to crack a joke inside my head, and I get to show my patient, hey, look, I'm going to clean my hands. I'm cleaning 5 fingers here, 5 fingers here. That's 5 for me, 5 for you. That's my hope, that by incorporating humor, I can get my students to learn to do this and make it a practice in the same way that I've got them to make it a practice and teach others how to cough and sneeze. So that's what I am intending to do with my class. And
We could take some questions now.
Yes, questions and discussion would be great.
Feedback on how using humor, but also tying it into the Daniels Fund principles. If someone has any questions or comments.
I have a comment or question.
Yes, Chrissy.
How hard would it be to put those posters everywhere on campus? Especially with COVID right now, I mean, you wouldn't have the joke necessarily to go with it for everyone, but 5 for me, 5 for you totally applies in COVID time. Like, I'm washing my hands for you and for me. I don't know, it seems like something that would be worthwhile to spread around.
That's a great question. The artwork is fairly expensive. We'd have to look at licensing it. But I'll tell you that there's a field. You can get a master's degree in infectious disease control, and infectious disease, every hospital has an infectious disease control officer. They've got usually an office and a small staff that's working on that. And when Ecolab comes into places that are having problems, what they find is that number of 23%, which is, I find, horrendous. Literally, you can, on their own, people are doing it about 25% of the time, and the posters are not that effective. One of the things I was thinking about initially was, Chrissy, maybe I could make a funny video with a song. There are a number of them made. They put different songs. They changed the lyrics, of course, and they have people dancing. There's a good one from Indonesia that I had a lot of fun with. It doesn't seem like it's particularly effective. It's this component of human behavior, and so we're trying to modify human behavior. I mean, just look at anytime you drive into the campus. I mean, you drive past a speed limit sign, right? You know, it's posted at 35 or 40, 45, whatever it is, the roadway. And then people are, if you're doing, if you have the audacity to do the speed limit, people are zipping past you. People are not good at following direction that way. So what my approach was, I want to practice it. The way Chrissy, by the way, is a former student of mine in A&P. Chrissy, you saw this. You saw people get better at coughing and sneezing. And you see the smile? People really actually do it because they're being graded on it. And then it becomes, but we make it into a joke. And so it's fun and there's humor with it. So we could do some sort of signage like that. We've got signage all over the campus already. I see this as a human nature issue where when it's problematic, it dries our hands out to wash, or it takes time, we're likely to cut corners. We want to speed. We want to get there fast. So as an academic body, the infectious disease control officers have not figured this out yet. So I'm just trying to figure it out for a small group, my students, and see if we can carry it forward. That's kind of a long answer to it. I don't have big hope for that.
I think you're right. I mean, for students to walk into the wellness center and get to the front desk, they have to walk by probably 4 or 5 signs that say,
Wash
do
your
not
hands.
come in if you
Cover
are
with a
sick.
mask. Yes.
And
cover your nose.
They still come in. So I think you're right. But it would be interesting to find out how it works in your class.
I hope to see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to measure it or not, but I think I'll have anecdotal evidence probably at best.
I have a comment too.
Yes, Tracy.
Dan. It reminds me, I was at an ethics and compliance officers professional meeting a while back, and they had a speaker on Freakonomics. And they actually did a study that people say, oh yes, I wash my hands after I use the restroom. And then they had a hidden camera, or I don't know how they did it, but they turned out that most people didn't. And so this issue about hand washing in front of the ethics compliance officers, they're saying that most people lie, about washing their hands after using.
It's rule of law when you're in the. I mean, it's a procedure that's expected, and it builds trust. It should build viability because you don't want to get your patients ill, and yet we have the problem that these things right here, we can't see viruses on them, we cannot see bacteria on them, and we can't see prions on them, and so it doesn't seem like they're real, and it's just hard to get people to comply with that. Yeah. If my slides hadn't gone out of order, Tracy, I was actually going to mention that. You probably don't spend as much time in men's room as I do. And if you ever spend just an extra 2 minutes in the men's room, like you're combing your hair or whatever it is, and you pay attention to how many guys walk out, it is 25% would be like, wow, we were so successful if we got 25% of the general population to wash their hands after the men's room. It's crazy. People don't believe this theory because they can't see germs. And there's not a direct connection in terms of time of, hey, I didn't wash my hands, now I'm sick. So it's a conundrum. It really hasn't been fixed. No one has broken the code. So I'm trying to figure out with my students, can I break the code and get them to see it's fun? I get rewarded. I get to make this Bugs Bunny joke forever. So everyone's muted. It's so quiet.
Yeah, Professor?
Yes.
I have a quick question for you, and this kind of, for me, goes to the larger trend that we've seen since COVID occurred. I think because the United States is so unique in our sense of liberty and our sense of freedom that we've actually had a really jumbled response in terms of mask wearing, hand washing, pandemic, especially compared to other nations. I know Vietnam became an early success story. The government got out, issued a major song, caught on, got viral, used influencers, things like that. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think that we're doing public messaging on public health measures such as masks and such as hand washing in the right way? I think there's so many times where somebody mentioned it before, you are seeing effectively saying, wear a mask, wash your hands, and it's a command. And people, especially here in the United States, don't respond that well to commands. Do you think that we as professionals, we who are listening to this lecture, do you think that we need to do a better job of saying why, of saying because it means we get to open up businesses earlier, because it means you get to go see your grandparents, because it means that we keep our communities healthier? Do you think we need to do a better job of explaining in that context?
I think we need to, Gordon, thank you for your question. That's a good question. I suspect we need to link it to a direct reward, an immediate reward, which is what I'm trying to do with humor. You get this internal reward. It tickles our funny bones to do it. And the way we've done masks and all these other things is generally punitive, as you're pointing out, that, do this or else, someone's going to crack on you. Someone's going to say something to you. And so that's not very motivating. But you're right, particularly to Americans. So I think maybe part of it is looking at the psychology of what actually works to get people motivated to do things. Avoiding a crack on the head will, that there's some motivation there, but as Americans, we're like, I'll walk around the length of your baton and do my own thing because that's what we do. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, it doesn't seem like the messaging is particularly strong. I know that it hasn't resonated with me. The messaging has not. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Hey, I'm looking at my watch right now. In 10 days, we'll be at March 19th when we started 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and I still can't have my full classroom in together. I don't think we flattened the curve. The messaging is off. So I would agree with you, Gordon, that the messaging is off. I don't know what the right messaging is, but I think it needs to look at what actually motivates people to do things internally, to want to. Why would you, Gordon, and I want to ever walk out of a men's room into a restaurant without washing our hands? You and I are probably the two guys that do it. I see you've seen it as well. You've seen lots of guys walk out into a restroom, sit down with their family, and now they're picking up fries and burgers and all sorts of. And you're like, germs exist, and there's got to be some connection there.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, or should we close?
Hi, Professor. I just have one question as well. Talking about with Ecolab, I've worked in the hospitality field. I'm very familiar with Ecolab. They've come in. I've always preferred their products over other vendors like Procter & Gamble that I've had within certain hotel chains that I've worked in. So I've been through some of their training as well. One thing I wanted to bring up as far as we were talking hospitals, my personal observations have always been, it seems like the ones that do it the most as far as that hand washing are the people that are coming in as far as the housekeeping side of the things, not the nurses, not the doctors.
Okay.
But I've always noticed more the people that are coming in to clean the rooms tend to be the ones using the hand sanitizer when they first come in.
Wow.
Then ultimately using it when they're leaving. And I don't know if maybe it's because of their job. So they're more in tune with things that can go on with that. But I've also noticed it working in hotels where my housemen, my people that are taking care of the public space, are more adamant about keeping up on hand washing and sanitizing than just my basic housekeeping staff. And I think some of that ties into, like you said, the training and even the question as far as, putting the posters out. We've all seen the posters in the restrooms at all these restaurants. Employees must wash hands before returning.
Right.
Those have been around for years and years. But I'm sure, just like myself, we always question how many of those employees actually abide by those guidelines.
Yes, Michael. Yeah, I agree with you. I let's look at that and I go, that's there to help me as the customer feel good about the supervision wants them to wash their hands. Whether they're going to do it, I don't know. And yet I can go into fast food restaurant or any other restaurant in the United States for that matter, and I'm usually not concerned about getting food poisoning, which is really interesting. But that's interesting that you'd see that in the hospitality business or in hospitals, particularly that's the cleaning staff is that you notice is doing that. That good on them. Yeah,
Right.
they're I wonder why that is. Along with you, I'm just thinking off the cuff. It seems like they're probably warned at the outset, you are in dirty rooms, you don't know who's here. Whereas the medical care staff does know, and they've got pressures on them to, I've got to see this patient and this patient and this patient. I've got alarms going off in these 2 rooms over here. I've got a report due here. And they try to cut corners because they don't have time.
Right.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, this is Judy Scott, and I just wanted to say the fun idea, I really like that.
Cool.
The most successful hand washing project that I've ever had, we put a giant bulletin board at the nursing station and we allowed nurses and the nursing assistants to cross hatch every time they washed. We gave prizes.
Yes.
And then after the next audit that we had, we saw that hand washing was improved. Now, how long did that last? I don't know.
Yeah.
But making it fun did help. And I will say my last hospital stay with family just recently, there was a lot more transparency, this washing in front of you. So somebody did a good job at the facility I was in. So thank you for this. I was trying to figure out where the ethical connection is, and now I see it, the transparency.
Yeah, I think so. You're welcome. Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
I'm going to close and thank everybody for your great comments. And again, thank you, Dan, Lieutenant Dan, for making that ethical connection about integrity, trust, and transparency. And I like the idea that washing your hands in front of someone to show that you are washing your hands. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. And if you are interested, join us at 4:30 for the community panel discussion. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Tracy.